I cheated on my husband during a corporate trip to Cancun with an intern 9 years younger. But he put a tracker and a hidden camera in my bag, recorded everything, and humiliated me in front of everyone. My name is Juliana. I am 33 years old, and I work as a customer service coordinator in a tourism company in the center of Monterrey. I am married to Ricardo, 37 years old, a civil engineer, a man whom my whole family has always admired for his dedication, honesty, and commitment to our marriage. When we got married 7 years ago, I believed I had found the perfect balance. He was stable, I was more spontaneous, and, together, we formed a complete couple. However, over time, this stability turned into a predictable, almost suffocating routine. I would wake up and already know every step of the day: coffee, work, quick messages at lunch, quiet dinners at home, and series before sleeping. There were no surprises, the butterflies in my stomach were gone. It was in this setting that the gap formed, which, without me realizing, widened until it destroyed what we had. The company I work for organizes a meeting every 2 years to celebrate the achievements reached. This last one would be special. 4 days in Cancun, staying at a beachfront resort, with all expenses paid, with themed parties at night and daytime excursions. I was excited simply to break the routine, but I had no idea that this trip would change the course of my life forever. A month before leaving, a new intern joined the team, Diego, a 24-year-old business student. He was everything that was missing in my daily life: energy, good humor, informal conversations, and a look that always seemed to hide secrets. We started interacting through work tasks, but little by little the conversations took on a more personal tone. I knew it was dangerous, but that attention awoke a part of me that I thought was dormant. Diego praised my appearance, saying that I looked much younger than I was, and every comment he made me feel more vulnerable. The trip arrived, and, with it, temptation in its purest form. Ricardo could not go. After all, it was a company event, and there were no companions. He helped me pack, wished me a good trip, and gave me a long kiss at the door. At the airport, Diego got closer than necessary, making jokes and comments that only the two of us understood. I felt a heat running through my body, and, deep down, I knew I was crossing an invisible line. The first night at the resort, after a communal dinner with all the staff, there was a party on the beach. Loud music, colored lights reflecting on the water, the smell of the sea, and alcohol. Diego offered me a drink, and I accepted. We chatted, laughed, and danced. He had a subtle way of touching me, as if he wanted to test my limits, and instead of moving away, I let myself go. When the party ended, some of the group went to their rooms, but Diego invited me to see his balcony. I knew I should refuse, but I accepted. On the balcony, the distant sound of the waves created a hypnotic atmosphere. We talked a little more, and then he leaned in, kissing me intensely, with confidence, as if he knew exactly what he wanted. My body responded before my mind could protest. We entered the room, and the accumulated tension exploded. His hands ran over my skin with urgency, and I felt alive in a way I had not felt in years. With every caress, with every sigh, I sank deeper into the certainty that I was doing something irreversible. While we were there, involved, I did not realize that hundreds of kilometers away Ricardo had already planted an invisible trap, something that would follow me without my knowledge, ready to record every one of my steps on that trip. The next morning, I woke up with the sunlight streaming into Diego's room and the distant sound of laughter from the employees who were already getting ready for breakfast. The first thing I felt was a strange weight in my chest, as if something was out of place. Diego was still asleep, lying on his side, with his arm over my waist. The scene was almost innocent, but I knew there was nothing innocent about what we had done. I got up slowly, trying not to wake him, and went back to my room with the caution of someone crossing a minefield. In the hallway, I crossed paths with 2 coworkers who greeted me with a normal smile, but to me, it seemed like they knew everything. In my room, I checked my phone. There were several messages from Ricardo. Good morning, asking me if I was having a good time, sending pictures of our dog, and a message saying he missed me. My stomach turned. I replied with short phrases, trying to sound natural. I showered, put on a light dress, and went to breakfast with the group, but my mind was elsewhere. While everyone was talking about the boat trip we would take that day, I was thinking about the night before, about Diego's touch, about the risk I had taken, and about the dangerous feeling of wanting more. The trip was beautiful. Turquoise sea, a cool breeze, Caribbean music playing softly on the boat. Diego was always nearby, sometimes watching me from afar, sometimes leaning in to make jokes. I tried to maintain physical distance, but emotionally I was already trapped. Deep down, I believed I could survive those intense days and return home as if nothing had happened. I clung to this illusion as if I could control the consequences. The second day ended with another party, this time in the main hall of the resort. Neon lights, a crowded dance floor, colorful drinks passing from hand to hand on trays. I tried to stay in the group, avoiding being alone with Diego, but one look from him was enough to make me give in. We ended up leaving the party early and going up to his room again. The excitement was faster this time, as if the simple act of repeating it was an extra stimulus. Diego grabbed me by the waist, pressed me against the wall, and the intensity increased. I could feel every muscle against my body, the heat, the smell, the sound of his ragged breathing. It was at that moment that something slipped my mind. A detail I could not imagine. On the nightstand, Diego's suitcase was open, and next to it was a small black object that I did not recognize instantly. Maybe a charger, maybe an external battery. I ignored it. I continued to give myself over to the moment as if the outside world did not exist. On the third day, while we were sunbathing by the pool, Diego commented that a colleague had seen him return late the night before and had made a joke about nocturnal visits. We laughed, but inside I felt a chill. I had put on a show so that no one would understand, but a single comment was enough for something to start. That night we left early to pack. In my room, alone, I sat on the bed and thought about Ricardo. I imagined him at home believing that I was taking advantage of him as a dedicated employee. I thought about how much he trusted me and how much I was betraying not only our marriage, but also the image he had of me. Still, I did not regret it immediately, just a vague unease that I pushed out of my mind. The flight back was the next day, and I was already preparing to go back to playing the role of a devoted wife. What I did not know was that, even before boarding, Ricardo already had all the necessary pieces to dismantle this charade, and that the proof was coming directly from my own pocket without me realizing it. The day of our return began with a cheerful farewell atmosphere among our colleagues. Everyone exchanged photos, promised to see each other, and laughed about moments from the trip. I maintained a practiced smile, but inside I was already rehearsing what I would say to Ricardo when I arrived. I thought about the details to make the story convincing. I would talk about the tours, show selected photos, comment on the heat, and how exhausting the event had been. Diego and I only exchanged a quick handshake in the hotel lobby, like two colleagues who simply respect each other. On the bus, on the way to the airport, I looked out the window and felt a pang of anticipated nostalgia, as if I were saying goodbye not only to the trip, but to that part of me that had given itself over to something forbidden. I did not know it yet, but that farewell would not be peaceful. Upon arriving in Monterey, my suitcase took a while to appear on the conveyor belt, and when I finally came out into the arrivals area, the first thing I saw was Ricardo, but it was not the reunion I had imagined. He was there, staring at me, serious. Next to him was a tripod with a cell phone recording, and in his hands another phone was pointed directly at me. I felt my heart accelerate. I approached, confused, and it was then that he spoke to me in a low but firm voice. I already know everything, Juliana. Since the first night. My mouth went dry. Before I could answer, he turned the phone screen towards me. There it was, sharp images from inside Diego's room, showing the two of us together, hugging, kissing, and then even more explicit scenes. I did not understand how they had been recorded until he pointed to my bag. The tracker and the camera were in there. You carried them with you the whole time. My world was spinning. The memory of that black object in Diego's room came to my mind, but no, it was not that. Ricardo had hidden the device in my bag even before I left. All I did was carry it with me, monitoring every room, every hallway, every moment. He knew where I was, who I was with, and he had enough recordings to refute any excuse I might try to invent. As I was still trying to process it, I realized that we were not alone. My parents, my sister, and two uncles were there, looking at me with expressions of astonishment and disappointment. Ricardo had called everyone to witness the moment. A lump formed in my throat. I tried to speak, but the words would not come out. He did not shout or make a fuss. He simply said, "Now everyone knows who you are." I wanted to disappear. The shame burned my skin. I looked around and saw passengers slowing down to watch the scene, some raising their phones. It was like being in a nightmare where you run but do not move. Ricardo turned off the camera, turned around, and simply said that the lawyer would be in touch. I stood there for a few seconds until my sister pulled me by the arm and said drily, "Let's go. You have done enough." This was not the ending I had imagined for my return. It was the beginning of a collapse that I still could not comprehend. On the way to my mother's house, where my sister left me without saying much, the silence was suffocating. I felt trapped in a fishbowl, hearing only the muffled sound of my own breathing and the roar of the car's engine. I tried to piece it together, to understand every detail that had escaped me, but it was impossible not to feel the weight of her gaze in the rearview mirror. When we parked, my mother was at the door. She did not hug me or ask if I was okay. She simply said with a harsh tone that I had rarely heard from her, "Your life has just changed, and it was no one else's fault." I entered without looking at anyone and went straight to the guest room. I threw my bag on the floor and sat on the bed, trying to understand that all of this had been planned even before I left. Ricardo did not act impulsively. He prepared every step, every piece, waiting for the opportune moment to reveal everything. Any anger that might have erupted in him was replaced by something much worse, a calculated coldness. And this coldness hurt more deeply than any shout or accusation. That night, I heard my parents talking in the living room. My mother said she did not know how she would face the family at the next gathering, while my father, in a grave voice, said that the shame was not his, but that it would inevitably spill over. I curled up under the blanket, feeling my whole body tremble. I took my phone to try to contact Ricardo, but I was already blocked on all networks and on his number. In the following days, the repercussions spread. I had no idea that Ricardo would share the videos with my family, but I discovered that he had also sent them to two close friends who now avoided answering me. One of them, Mariana, sent me a single sentence, "I cannot believe you did this to him." The other one blocked me without saying anything. I had not yet returned to work, but I received messages from colleagues with links to internal chat groups where my name was mentioned with innuendos and indirect comments. I spent hours mentally reviewing every moment when I sensed what was coming. The tracker in my bag, Ricardo's messages asking me where I was, his decision to avoid the trip when we called, it was all there, but I was so distracted by the news from Diego that I did not notice. And now, not only was my marriage destroyed, but my image was crumbling in front of people I had known for years. On the fourth day, Ricardo's lawyer called me. She told me that she had already started the divorce proceedings, that there were no assets to divide, except for a few things, and that she would deliver them to speed up the process. There was no room for discussion or negotiation. It was just a formality to close something that for him had already ended on the first night of my trip. Meanwhile, Diego, the intern, showed no signs of life. No messages, no calls. It was as if he had erased us from his memory as soon as the plane landed. Perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of contempt. Deep down, I knew he had no reason to look for me. He had nothing to lose. I did. I started to avoid leaving the house. Any sound from my cell phone made me think it was another person judging me, another person distancing themselves. My parents treated me with the formality of those who live together out of obligation. And I, who had always been extroverted, now avoided any conversation. The fear of being exposed became constant, but the shame was even greater. I could not find the words to defend myself because I knew that, no matter how hard I tried, there was no justification that could erase the images Ricardo had recorded. The following week, the pressure began to filter into my work. I received a call from my boss asking me to attend an alignment meeting. The tone was professional, but I sensed the underlying tension. When I arrived, she was with the human resources director. They said that, although the company had no control over my personal life, the situation was causing discomfort among my colleagues and affecting the work environment. They did not ask me to leave, but they suggested I take an unpaid leave of absence to let things calm down. I left feeling that I had lost another pillar, not only my marriage and my family, but also my professional career. I went back home and locked myself in my room. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how in less than 2 weeks I had gone from a stable life to a state of almost isolation. In the midst of all this, I started to think about what Ricardo felt as he planned everything. I did not know if he just wanted revenge or to teach me a lesson. The truth is that he achieved both things. The way he set up the scene at the airport, with everyone present and filming, was not only intended to expose me, but to make me a negative example for anyone who thought about doing the same. And it worked. One night, I summoned the courage to send him a letter. I wrote it by hand, expressing my feelings, apologizing, saying that I was deeply sorry and that I at least wanted to talk. I sent it the next day. 2 weeks later, the envelope came back sealed with a postmark that said, "Rejected by recipient." That was the last straw. He kept insisting on rejecting it. I started to avoid even looking at myself in the mirror. I had a hard time facing the person I had become. I did not recognize my own gestures, my posture. What hurt me the most was remembering how I had underestimated Ricardo. I truly believed he would never find out, that I controlled the story, and in the end, I realized that he knew me better than I knew myself. My days became silent, interrupted only by brief conversations with my mother about trivial matters. My father barely spoke to me, and, when he did, it was with short, direct phrases. Diego remained missing, and, deep down, I no longer wanted to see him. He represented not only the betrayal, but also the trigger for all the destruction that followed. One afternoon, I received a notification on my phone. It was a video from the WhatsApp group of my old university class. I recognized it instantly. The scene at the airport, recorded from a different angle, with a clear audio of my family staring at me. Someone wrote, "Never underestimate a smart husband." I closed the application and deleted the conversation, but it was too late. The video was circulating in places I did not even imagine. I started having trouble sleeping. When I closed my eyes, I saw the scene at the airport repeating like a nightmare on a loop. I would wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, as if I were about to be discovered again. It was not just shame, but the constant fear that this story would never be forgotten. As the days went by, I realized that my life had become hostile territory. Places that were once routine now seemed to be plagued with invisible threats. Going to the supermarket, for example, became a test of endurance. I felt persistent stares, hushed whispers, and sometimes smiles that seemed more like irony. I do not know if it was all real or if my mind, already on high alert, interpreted every gesture as a judgment. The truth is that I was constantly tense, waiting for the next blow. My mother, even without saying it openly, began to avoid going out with me. She said she was tired, that she preferred to stay at home, but I knew it was to avoid being associated with me in public. My father, on the other hand, maintained such a great emotional distance that it seemed we lived in separate houses. Our relationship was limited to good morning and good night, with no further dialogue. I had become a ghost within my own family. It was in this climate that I received the official summons to appear at the first divorce hearing. I read and reread the document, trying to absorb every word, and I had the feeling of reading the announcement of my failure. There was no room for negotiation or reconciliation. Ricardo requested immediate dismissal, alleging an irreversible breach of trust. In the space for additional comments, he simply wrote, "Evidence attached." This coldness broke me more than any insult. I tried to seek the support of an old friend, Fernanda, who always defended me in any situation. I called her, I explained my version, I told her details, and I even cried. She listened to me in silence and replied, "It is not that I do not want to understand. It is that this time there is no way to defend you." After that, she said goodbye and never contacted me again. A 10-year friendship vanished into silence. Meanwhile, at work, my absence was already taking its toll. Even with the unpaid leave, I knew my image was compromised. A colleague sent me a screenshot of an internal email that said that certain personal behavior was damaging the team's reputation. They did not mention names, but everyone knew who they were referring to. The nights became my worst enemy. Insomnia mixed with the memories of the trip, but now, instead of excitement, they were full of regret and shame. Every caress, every kiss with Diego loomed over my mind as evidence that I had wasted something much bigger than the adrenaline of a few days. One morning, I decided to open a bottle of wine that I had stored in the kitchen pantry. I sat on the floor, leaning against the pantry, and drank directly from the bottle, trying to silence my thoughts. I remembered Ricardo's face at the airport, without tears, without shouts, just a penetrating calm that said everything. It was then that I realized that what hurt me the most was not what he did to me, but what he did not do. He did not try to understand me. He did not give me space to explain myself. He did not even leave a door ajar. He excluded me completely with the phone in his hand. I even contacted Diego through social media. He had blocked me the day we returned from the trip. There were no messages, no trace of him. The conclusion was obvious. For him, I was just a passing adventure that had gone too far. Lying in bed, I looked at the ceiling and tried to imagine what it would be like to rebuild my life. I could not. Everything felt heavy, slow, and colorless. I did not know it yet, but the worst moment, the one that would engrave this story forever in my memory, was about to happen, and there would be no cameras from Ricardo, no audience, no words. It would just be me alone, facing myself. That moment came a few days later, when I decided I needed to go to the apartment we shared with Ricardo to get some things. I took a small suitcase and the keys, thinking he would not be there. The building was the same, but it felt different, as if it were rejecting me. The doorman looked at me with a strange expression, opened the gate, and simply said, "He left you an envelope." I took the envelope and went up the stairs. Upon entering the apartment, I noticed a strange smell, of recent cleaning, but also of absence. My belongings were stored in boxes in the living room, labeled with my old handwriting. He had used papers that I kept in the drawer. On the table was the envelope that the doorman had mentioned. I opened it and found a brief and firm letter. "Juliana, every decision has a price. This is yours. Do not come back." No signature, no date. That is all. I stood there reading and rereading until the letters began to blur. I sat on the floor next to the boxes and felt the weight of everything on me. His absence in that space was more painful than any confrontation. It was as if he had erased every trace of me, except for the belongings that were now ready to be stolen. I took some clothes, an old photo album, and a mug I used every morning. I left the rest behind, as if acknowledging that they no longer belonged to me. As I closed the door for the last time, I felt that I was not only closing a marriage, but a part of my identity. In the elevator, I met a neighbor who had always been kind to me. She smiled briefly, but did not ask any questions. However, before she left, she told me, "I hope you find yourself." It did not sound offensive, but rather an acknowledgement. I was truly lost. On the way back to my mother's house, I passed by places we used to frequent together. The corner cafe, the market where we shopped on Saturdays, the square where we walked the dog. Each one seemed to me a painful reminder that that life no longer existed. That night, lying in bed, I began to think about the beginning of my marriage. I remembered our honeymoon in Oaxaca, the late-night conversations, the plans for the future. It was like watching a movie whose ending I already knew, but which still made me want to change the script. Only there was no going back. The only thing left for me was to face that the betrayal was not an isolated act, but a sequence of conscious decisions. And now each one had a weight, and I was alone to carry them all. The following days became eternal, as if time had lost its rhythm. I woke up late, avoided all contact with the outside world, and spent hours looking at my phone, opening and closing applications without reading anything. It was as if my mind were trapped in a dense fog, where every thought returned to the same images: the hotel room, Diego's touch, Ricardo's look at the airport. These scenes did not follow each other linearly. They appeared in flashes, interrupting any attempt to move forward. My mother insisted that I see a psychologist. She said it was not healthy to live like this, shut in, avoiding even my family. I agreed out of courtesy, but deep down I felt an almost childish resistance. A part of me believed that I did not deserve help, that I needed to feel the full weight of what I had done to perhaps learn something from it. It was during this time that I began to receive anonymous messages on Instagram. Profiles without photos, generic names, with phrases like "traitor" or "that is what happens when you mess with serious people." I do not know if they were acquaintances, coworkers, or simply curious people who saw the video. Each notification made me shrink a little more. The outside world seemed manipulated against me. One day I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood to get some fresh air. As I passed a bakery, I heard two women talking and laughing. One looked at me and whispered something to the other, who burst out laughing. I do not know if it was about me, but the feeling was enough to make me change direction and go back home. Walking, which used to be a light habit, now felt like a dangerous exposure. At night, I started having recurring dreams in which Ricardo would turn his phone screen to show me the images. In the dreams, sometimes the video was not the same. It showed different people, different places, but the feeling of being caught was always the same. I would wake up sweating and breathing heavily, as if I had run a marathon. Diego remained absent, and his silence was, in a way, more bearable than the judgment of those who stayed. He had been a spark, but the fire that followed was my own doing. What tormented me the most was realizing that deep down I had chosen every step that had led me there. It was not a coincidence or a mistake. It was one decision after another. One day, while I was having coffee alone, I received an email from the company's human resources department. They informed me that due to my prolonged absence and the negative impact on the company's image, they were terminating my contract. The tone was cold, almost mechanical, as if they were simply following protocol. I felt a tightness in my chest, but I was not surprised. I had been waiting for this moment to arrive. Unemployment brought with it a new layer of uncertainty. It was not just about the financial problem, but about the stigma I carried. How would I explain in job interviews why I left my previous company? How would I face the possibility that the interviewer had already seen or heard my story? With every scenario I imagined, the shame became an even greater obstacle than the lack of opportunities. So my routine was reduced to surviving one day at a time, without plans or expectations. The future seemed like an unknown and hostile territory, and I still did not know if I would have the courage to cross it. The divorce hearing was scheduled for a rainy morning. I dressed in neutral clothes, pulled my hair back, and walked to the courthouse alone. Ricardo was already there, accompanied by his lawyer. When I entered the courtroom, he did not look at me even once. He remained focused on the paperwork, answering only when the judge asked him direct questions. The process was quick, without arguments or discussions. We simply formalized what had already been decided. Each of us would go our own way without ties. Finally, the judge asked if there was anything else to say. Hoping to secure at least one last exchange, I said that I wanted to apologize in person. Ricardo, without looking at me yet, replied, "There is nothing more to say." It was like a door slamming shut, closing off any possibility of reconciliation. I left the forum with such a feeling of emptiness that I had to stop at a cafeteria to breathe. I looked out the window at the people passing by in a hurry, going on with their daily lives, not realizing that for me everything seemed to have stopped. I took a sip of coffee and realized that even the taste had changed. Nothing tasted the same. In the following days, I finished moving my belongings to my mother's house. The apartment I shared with Ricardo was left only as a memory, a place I could not return to even if I wanted to. I began to consider moving to another city, perhaps to a place where no one knew my story, but it was not just about escaping from others. I had to deal with myself, and that would not change with a new address. One afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Ricardo's sister. She said she was not calling to argue or humiliate me, but to ask me not to try to contact him again. She said he was fine, rebuilding his life, and did not want anything to remind him of what had happened. I thanked her with a choked voice and promised to respect her wish. When I hung up, I realized that it would be easy to keep that promise because there was nothing I could offer or say that would change the story. Over time, I distanced myself more and more from everything that connected me to the past. I deleted photos, avoided places, even changed my cell phone number, but no matter how hard I tried, there was something I could not erase: the collective memory. The video from the airport continued to circulate, and from time to time I discovered that it had reappeared in some group or social network. No matter how much time passed, it remained a permanent mark. I began to understand that reconstruction would not be achieved by erasing what had happened, but by learning to live with it. And this acceptance was slow, painful, and full of setbacks. Some days I could get out of bed and do small things. Others, everything seemed too much. What sustained me was the hope, however fragile, that one day people would stop defining me only by that mistake. Months have passed since that morning at the airport, but the scene is still engraved in my mind as if it happened yesterday. I close my eyes and I still see Ricardo standing there coldly, cell phone in hand, while the images he recorded exposed me for all to see. I feel the same coldness in my stomach. I hear the murmurs of the people around me. I notice the exchanged glances. It is like an open wound that never heals, that throbs every day. Whatever I do, nothing can erase that moment. Since then, my life has become a narrow hallway, without windows or exits. I do not make plans. I do not create expectations. I simply exist. Every day is the same as the last. An exhausting repetition that reminds me that I destroyed everything myself. The few conversations I still have with acquaintances are superficial, and I feel the weight of judgment even in the silence. I avoid crowded places. I avoid meeting anyone who might recognize me. Regret is not a sporadic visitor. It lives with me. I wake up and sleep with the devastating certainty that I chose every step that led me to the end. I cannot blame anyone but myself. Every time I accepted a suggestion from Diego, every message I replied to, every encounter I could have avoided, I built with my own hands the stage that destroyed me. And now I pay the price every day without rest. Shame is like a second skin. No matter how much I try to hide it, it is always there, stuck to me. I no longer smile for real. When I talk to someone, it is as if I am playing a role, trying to seem normal, but inside everything is gray. I no longer feel like doing anything that used to make me happy because everything seems false compared to the void I have left in my life. Looking back is a cruel exercise. I can clearly see the moments when I could have stopped, when I still had time to preserve what I had with Ricardo, but I did not. I deceived myself into thinking it was just an adventure, that nothing would get out of my hands. I thought I was smarter than any suspicion, and now I live suffocated by the certainty that I was naive, selfish, and cowardly. I do not know if Ricardo acted to destroy me or simply to protect himself. Maybe it was both, but what he did was definitive. He left no room for apologies or explanations. He took away any possibility of return, and the way he exposed me prevented me from moving forward without bearing the mark of a traitor. The video continues to circulate, and every time it reappears it is as if it transports me to that day. No matter how much time passes, it remains a living reminder of my failure. Today I live alone, but not by choice. It is a forced isolation driven by shame. The apartment is too small and quiet, and this silence suffocates me. At night, I lie in bed, and the darkness swallows me along with my thoughts. I review everything in my head, trying to understand how I got to this point, and the answer is always the same. I wanted to, and I did. My relationship with my family has not recovered. We talk the bare minimum, like strangers with a blood tie. My parents still look at me with a sadness that I can no longer bear. I know I disappointed not only Ricardo, but everyone who believed in me. There is no real comfort. There is no light at the end of the tunnel. Only the constant echo of an incorrigible mistake and the certainty that the person I once was will never exist again. I live every day with the feeling that I am serving a sentence that I wrote myself, and the sentence is perpetual.